If there's one thing that will guarantee arguments when discussing 40k, it's showing pictures of one of my games. Every time there will be comments about the actual layout itself, to the type of terrain, to the look of the terrain, to the contentious subject of 10th edition ruin spam, and I get it, I truly do. Terrain is one of the most important components when it comes to playing 40k, but I do think there's a lot of vitriol thrown around unnecessarily in conversations about the battlefields and how they should be presented. I want to discuss all facets of terrain in this video, from what terrain is, why it's important to the game of 40k, current status quo, issues with the nothing but ruins battlefield design, and ultimately what I think the true problems are and how to fix them. Whilst I understand there is a dissatisfaction with what 40k is in 10th edition when it comes to terrain, there is a lot of hyperbolic gesturing, as there always is on the internet. And I think that needs to be reined in if we want to properly dig into the way that 10th edition presents the interactive thematic battlefields of the 41st millennium. And to do that, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. So, L-shaped ruins. You probably already have a comment ready to go, regardless of what I say in this video, so go on, let it all out, get it off your chest and tell me all of your problems. Not all of your problems, I'm not your therapist or your mum, but anyway, I'm somewhat curious if this video will change a few people's minds, or maybe I just have such L takes that people actually double down instead, but either way, pre-engagement. Subscribe. There's a lot to get through before we get to the ins and outs of L-shaped ruins, and there will be people who are familiar with 40k, for which some of this stuff will be obvious, common knowledge. But there is a decent amount of my audience that is not that familiar with 40k and its inner workings, so we need a bit of setup on how 40k works and the purpose of terrain. Let's start with the bare basics. You and your buddy want to get into 40k, so you are both new players. You've just got a couple of combat patrols together, and you want to play the game. You have a space carved out, probably on a table, where you will play the game. You have your armies, you have a mission that tells you what you need to achieve, some objectives you need to get to achieve them, but as you start to place your units down in deployment, you realize that you are currently battling on an open field in the fens, and you've decided to play World Eaters into a Tau gun line. In order to stop your blood-crazed maniacs from becoming nothing but a red smear on the ground due to the power of futuristic laser beams and anime, you need somewhere to hide. What you need is something to just break up that open field, something that you can stage behind as you approach the Gundams of the greater good. What you need is some terrain. 10th edition offers a wide variety of different options for your terrain. If you're about to comment that it doesn't, shut up, because it actually does, but we'll get to that. 10th edition offers a wide variety of options such as craters and rubble, barricades, fuel pipes, debris, statues, hills, industrial structures, sealed buildings, containers, woods, and ruins, with rules to support them, and there are a lot of different things that fit into those categories to make really interesting and thematic tables. Hills could be your standard rolling hills, or they could be an alien planetary growth, or even a grim dark pile of skulls. You could have a battle that takes place in a city, or a dense jungle, or even on the back of some unfathomably giant beast. All sorts of awesome stuff. But outside of a few very select locations, that unfortunately isn't how it plays out. I'd love it if it was that easy to defend 10th edition by just vaguely gesturing towards the cool rulebook and saying, look, see, you don't just have to play ruins. The reality is that for most games of 40k, that idyllic landscape of limitless possibilities just doesn't happen and probably will not happen. But why not? Why has all of that potential been reduced down to the lowest common denominator where every game uses the same few layouts and stone city ruins ad infinitum? A decent amount of the comments I asked for earlier and some of the more passionate viewers are probably yelling competitive players at the screen, but I don't think that's entirely the case. Sure, the increase in competitive or match play events may contribute to the standardization of terrain, but I doubt there are competitive players out there frothing at the mouth when they see a piece of terrain with a tree on it. There's a lot of reasons we're in this situation. Some of those reasons, and some of the more pertinent ones, are not the results of competitive players whining about stuff to make their game balanced, but are instead new and casual players. And to try and minimize the risk of people wanting to tear me a new hole for that statement, I'll continue talking to not leave you a pause in the video to yell at me. I'm just going to move on to my reasoning. Let's go back to that previous scenario. Two new players setting up a game for the first time. You set up your battlefield in the East Midlands of England. It's flatland flat, and there's no cosmic apple around to whisk you into some third dimension. You need something to break it up, and the solution, like I said, is to use some terrain. Except you don't have any terrain. And hell, even if you did, how do you set up the terrain? How much do you need? How big should they be? What kind? There are loads of these different types. Should they be woods, craters, pipes, closed buildings, ruins? All of these different rules. And where should they go? How do you make it fair? What if we use too little? That benefits Tau and the game will be over immediately. But if we use too much, then World Eaters will win as the Tau can't get any shots off. So Damn, this is so confusing. Fuck this. Do you want to just play Mario Party so we can get pissed off each other way more efficiently? Yes, that was a little bit over the top, but it's exaggerated to illustrate my point. You can take it a little bit further to two players who are not complete beginners, but aren't exactly experts, and need some help in understanding what a good, balanced board looks like. They aren't going to be flashy or thematic, but the default Games Workshop layouts are serviceable to get a decent game in that isn't going to cause arguments because someone only won due to battlefield bias. And they're quick as well. You don't need to think too much. You can just look at the tournament companion, grab a layout, get some terrain measured up, and off you go. This may be considered a hot take, but standardization is useful. No, you aren't going to be able to forge a specific story around a certain planet and their temple MacGuffin, but for getting a game in, and to be very clear here, not necessarily a competitive one, having a standard set of layouts is great to save that time. Even in casual games, or hell, even narrative ones, it never feels good to waste a minimum of 2 hours on a game that was doomed from the start because you didn't set up the board right, after potentially already spending far too much of your limited time trying to set that board up properly. I did a little bit of research for this video, by which I mean I googled for 5 minutes to go back and look at some previous editions to see if I could find what it was like in the before times, but I didn't really find that much. I did find the terrain section from the 5th edition rulebook though, and even back then it's talking about too much or too little terrain being bad, and that about maybe 25% of the table should be terrain, which is about the same as it is in 10th edition. The tournament companion just makes that part easier for most people, so they don't have to worry about having to be an expert in setting up balanced boards. Now, you might be saying, Paul, you spicy little sausage, that's all well and good, but you can have standardized layouts that utilize many different elements of terrain and not just ruins. And if you are saying that, then I don't know why you said it out loud, that is a bit weird, but yes, that is absolutely true, and there is an argument to be made that this is a weakness of the tournament style balance that permeates through all of the 40k community, even to casual tables. So why ruins and not any of these other terrain types? Are ruins ruining the game?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Let's see what Games Workshop has to say about ruins in the Tournament Companion. The following layouts primarily use the ruins terrain feature. This efficiently achieves a good amount of line of sight blocking and cover appropriate for balanced games, thanks to the natural abstraction of line of sight within the rules for ruins. For organizers and players with a more robust terrain collection, especially elements that block true line of sight, incorporating features such as woods, barricades, and hills into your chosen layouts is perfectly acceptable. So I believe there are two important things in these quotes. Firstly, references to line of sight and true line of sight. Determining whether a model can see another is done by line of sight. Can you draw a line from model A to model B without terrain piece C being in the way? True line of sight is the continuation of that. Line of sight isn't something you draw from above, it's measured from the position of the models themselves. You have to lean down to the table and line up your model from its height to try and draw a bead to the target like you're playing snooker. Lots of the terrain elements block line of sight in this way. In fact, pretty much all of the tall ones do, except maybe woods because they have gaps in them. But some of the thinner terrain suggestions like statues make it hard to hide an entire unit from the eyes of a shooter. And closed buildings, whilst easy to hide behind, take up a massive footprint of area that you either have to climb over or move around, funneling armies into smaller lanes on the board. Ruins are both an area that you can walk through as inventory and areas that block line of sight and can still be hid behind like closed buildings for obscuring protection. So they're a useful terrain type to make the kinds of battlefields that are more fun and interesting to play. But that comes at the cost of ruins being fairly constrained in the kinds of elements of a battlefield that can be considered ruins for those more thematic and visually appealing tables. It's hard to make an L-shaped ruin wall out of trees unless someone has decided to grow a very specific forest. The L shape specifically is useful because it provides two sides for protection and two sides for potential attack. Some layouts will have these C shapes that require more effort to get behind, but for the most part, the L's are where it's at to give that balance and a more clear idea of where the protection is for your units. Now, for the other part of the quote that I think is important is incorporating features such as woods, barricades, and hills is perfectly acceptable for the player and organizers with robust terrain collections. Basically, you can use those elements. That's totally fine. But the key part I want to point out here is with robust terrain collections. That part affects both your casual home tables and your tournament events with many tables. For tournaments, there's something that doesn't really get addressed when I see comments about my tournament games. People hate seeing the same boring terrain repeatedly and how it must be awful playing on such repetitive terrain over and over. Some even saying they'd rather die than play with L-shaped ruins, which is a tad dramatic, don't you think? There's a big reason I don't mind it. Logistics. I want to play some games of 40k. I can play a bunch of those games at these tournaments against awesome, friendly people. Yes, it's competitive, but it's not like entering a lion's den of sweaty grognards. It's just other people who want to play a fun, balanced game of 40k without having to worry about the logistics. What's the easiest way to get enough terrain to fill tens, hundreds, or potentially thousands of tables? A bunch of easy to use, easy to store, repeatable L-shaped or square ruins. Something that's durable for repeated use, not easily broken like a forest terrain piece might be, or a building with an antenna or other protrusions. Just solid, recognizable, safe ruins. Would it be awesome if every tournament could be like going to an event at the Tabletop Tactics Lodge? Yes, they put a lot of time and love into this terrain for their videos, and they can now share that at events with others to play on these wonderfully thematic battlefields. I imagine if you have a permanent place that you can keep tables up like this, or maybe a Games Workshop store or something, then running events would be awesome and would definitely be something that those ruin rejectors would appreciate and would get them actually into the game. But now imagine that you're a local tournament organizer, or an organization like UKTC, or any TO that has to travel with their stuff, or doesn't have a permanent location, or has to cater to not only just 20 tables, but 200 tables. This isn't even a problem with the variety of terrain. Let's say that the Tabletop Tactics guys found a way to clone Fletcher and had a basement full of Fletchers making arrows. And then next door had a bunch of clones of Fletcher making and painting terrain. Sorry, that was a terrible joke. They then gave all of that terrain to the big tournament organizers to use. Awesome! Look at all that cool terrain! Now, make sure that you can store, transport, set up, take down, and repack all of those different battlefields without anything breaking, and whilst being fair and balanced across every table so that someone isn't going to get an advantage because they were placed on the table with the Harlequin platform that happens to have a different wall for line of sight. Yes, I can admit that the same ruins can be dull, but when I'm going to these events, I can let that slide, because the alternative is that the event just simply doesn't exist. And I want to play some Warhammer. You can still have some fun, narrative, or fluffy things occur during these kind of games. I don't necessarily need the terrain to look pretty or unique to tell stories, like the Screaming Ravens having a fear of the Lion, or their clashes with the World Eaters, or their disdain and long-term rivalry with the Chaos Knight House Raptoris. Logistics also affects the other end of the spectrum as well. Let's once again go back to that first scenario. Okay, new players, flat field, need some terrain. You've looked up the terrain rules, you have a layout, just put down your terrain and you're good to go. What's the matter? Why are you looking at me like that? Just go get your terrain. Oh, right. You don't have any terrain. Well, you could buy some terrain, but you've just bought all of the models and you're ready to play now. Or you maybe just don't have the time or patience to get a good, decent set of terrain. So what do? Well, you do what the majority of casual players do. And that includes people wanting to try and be more competitive and people wanting to try and be more narrative. Just grab anything. Pieces of paper or cardboard for the terrain footprint, then whatever you can scrounge together as makes your terrain. Old bits of sprue blue tacked together, books, games, scrap, packaging materials, anything really to make something that at least shows where the lines are drawn. And what's the easiest thing to make from everyday junk lying around? It certainly isn't woods, it's ruins. And more specifically, L-shaped ruins or small walls. Then once you're ready to commit to a more permanent terrain solution, the easiest ones to get a hold of are sets that encompass that standard terrain layout. Like for example, Tabletop Stronghold, where you can get the highest quality MDF terrain and mini cases created by a powerful wizard who harnesses the power of magnets. Keep your minis of any size safe, secure, and easy to store. Your minis of any size will fit into the Mad Case 2.0 thanks to the adjustable trays and the terrain bond that includes everything you need to build a brilliant balanced battlefield. There's 25% off using code PAUL25 and free shipping as always to the USA, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and most of the EU. So once again, thank you Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring. Go to tabletopstronghold.com or click the link in my description so you don't have to continue digging through everyone's rubbish like a raccoon to be able to play any 40k. I'm sure most people agree with me on the logistics side of things, where catering to large events and needing consistency or just getting started and needing something to work off means that having these standardized layouts of ruins makes sense. And even narratively, you could still work with that to play out some really awesome stories without needing to invest the time, budget, or equipment to create these epic battlefields that are fully immersive and can tell more engaging and varied tales. You just have to be willing to tell a lot of stories that take place in ruins. I do believe the Oops All Ruins paradigm does have a place in 40k from the perspective of accessibility, ease of use, removing barriers to entry, and balance. I'm not saying it's perfect or, hell, even desirable, but it's a decent system that, whilst repetitive, is at least predictable. And just to be absolutely clear, I don't think anyone is exactly excited by L-shaped ruins. I don't believe there's anyone out there judge dooming it, happy that Toontown has been torn down to make way for miles and miles of open concrete L's, bouncing off the walls and screaming in excitement that they can finally play without nothing but ruins. I also think that most people are at least happy that they can get a game in relatively easily, and that there's resources out there that make getting into those games less of a hassle. Realistically, if you're a player who plays narrative with access to a lot of wonderful scenery and you're playing with others who are excited to build these incredible battlefields to tell specific stories with your armies, then the L-shaped ruins shouldn't really affect you. You've already got it worked out. There is, however, going to be a section of the player base that is caught between these two. People who want to play games, but probably rely on pickup games or have only got access to these default terrain sets, and trying to find a game at a local club or FLGS against someone that you've not met who has the same mindset as you, and you can both agree on a terrain layout that works for both of you. That's difficult. But you're so against ruin spam that you refuse to play it, so you simply don't, and that's a real shame, I think. And like I say, I do understand it. I do get that if you play this game not just for the game side and you always want to have that narrative flavor, you're kind of stuck. I can sympathize. I'd hate to play a D&D campaign that is just combats in the same ruins over and over with no real story. I play D&D for the narrative, but I've also played in small self-contained one-shots that are purely there just for combat, which are also fun, but those kind of campaigns were with friends and we agreed on what it was ahead of time. For the most part, if I was going to a local shop to play some D&D and everyone around me was just playing L-shaped ruin dungeon crawls, and that was considered the default way to play and the only one with any real support, I'd be pissed off. I even suspect that just taking the ruin out of L-shaped ruins might help, but obviously L-shapes are hard to make out of anything else except walls. Maybe some, Tyranid style spikes could work, or chaos flame walls, or derelict machinery, or scrap piles could be shaped into L's, but it's that sheer wall that is more tricky to work around. I think you can still tell a story with the L-shaped ruins, but like I said before, it's a lot of ruined cities. And those cities can be from the Imperium or a Xenos race, but they're still ruined cities fighting in urban warfare, which at least makes sense for a lot of 40k, but it is still repetitive. However, I think the issue here goes beyond the ruins. From discussions on my streams or from the comments I've read, some people are just truly opposed to the current terrain layout design, who may have even stopped playing entirely because of the way everything is ruins now and the lack of variety or visual diversity. But I don't think it's the ruins that are the problem. You can do a lot with ruins. Every civilization has ruins. Ruins are just the remains of something that was once there and has been destroyed or left forgotten. The problem isn't the ruins. The problem is the letter L. And that makes a ton of sense. I finally get you guys. L is a terrible letter. An L take is a bad take. Taking the L means to lose. It's the icon for League of Legends. You'd be looking kind of dumb with a finger and a thumb in the shape of an L in your forehead. An L is only worth 1 point in Scrabble. Nobody's favorite letter is L. It's a boring letter that gets lost somewhere in the middle of the alphabet. It doesn't feel strong or powerful like the good letters like X or Z or P. So when you're only seeing the same letter over and over, of course you're going to go mad. Of course you're going to leave angry comments about it. You ask for variety, just a smidge of a change, just a glimpse of something new as a treat, but all you see is L-shaped ruins. People start telling you, oh, that's fine, you can make them something other than ruins. Use a little imagination, but that they just don't understand that it's not the ruins that's a problem, it's the shape. What you want is a whole alphabet of ruins. No longer will your lovingly laid out battlefields be littered with limited L's. Thanks to your old pal Paul and his ingenious headaches with pictures, here's some terrain layouts featuring every single letter of the alphabet that are balanced, competitive, and even narrative. You can utilize these new ruin shapes to create the most varied, interesting, and most importantly, fun battlefields you can imagine. To help you with understanding these brand new, extremely unique, totally different ways of configuring ruins, I've created some fantastic example terrain layouts based on 40k terms so that you can easily find the right ruins for you. Or P or B or whichever other letter of the alphabet you're looking for. With the Xenos battlefield, you're already going to be blown away with this new shape. The best shape, the hexagon, which is going to help us get that very round but very friend-shaped O, surrounded on all sides by walls. This could represent a closed building, but to keep with the ruined theme, this could just be a place to stage for all of your infantry to try and prepare a charge in any direction. And also a fun little extra bonus game to try and keep every model 1.1 inches away from every single wall of this 6-sided safe space. Using some diagonal lines to create an N makes traversing these smaller sections a pain, which will slow down those faster units. The E makes 1 room 2 rooms with this nice dividing ruin wall, so you can feel like you're in a ruin that was once owned by a landlord who buys houses and tries to find new and creative ways to push the boundaries of what could constitute a bedroom to help squeeze as many people as possible for rent in a shared house. Either side of that E are 2 big ruins that you could say are just L's, but clearly they are not. Why would you say that? Because they are connected by a walkway spanning over the top of the E. A sublimely simple solution to connect 2 very large ruin walls that you can walk across and try to balance your models on and inevitably knock off. And for the X, just get creative with those ruins by adding a little extra chest-high wall extending out in front of those ruins that turns a boring arrangement into an expertly excavated ruin for an exciting experience enjoyed with a nice espresso. With the Inquisitor layout, you can use the quintessential Q to make quite an impact on the quality of the battlefield, alongside a T and U, which are more standard but nevertheless important features. Taking inspiration from some of the terrain I've played on, you can use pieces like this to create something for an I. And here is a really resplendent R ruin with a smaller gap to enter this main space and an alcove outside. If 10th edition just hasn't been your bag, you probably also missed the psychic phase, so you can now bring it back with the psychic layout. Does that mean the rules change? No, don't be so fucking stupid. Why would you even think that? But you can at least feel like the psychic phase means something when you look at these unique, awesome shapes like the P, Y, C, and H. Is H just an I on its side? Is Y just the same as T, which is just the same as X without the protrusion? Is P stored in the balls? Stop asking questions, dumbass. Maybe you aren't an orc player and you don't have the chance to say Boom Daka Snaz Wagon nearly enough in your daily life. So to remedy that, you can use the Boom Daka Snaz Wagon layout. Look at that A and B ruin working so well together. Having been so close for so long in the alphabet, they sure know how to collaborate. A deep ruin with another walkway that can be entered from the north or south side, marking across the A to the back of B, with another divide here, which can also be used to represent the M or W. What do you mean I got lazy and couldn't be bothered to make a separate one for M, W, and B? What do you mean that's just the E? What do you mean I said they'd all be unique and totally different? Well, let me tell you something, buddy. G, K, and Z make some really interesting shapes to help spice up your battlefields with these premium letters. Imagine all the fun stories you could tell with your units hiding in this cubby hole here and then shooting across to the exact same building on the other side. That is a totally normal thing for any city to have. Or maybe it's a cave. It doesn't have to be a city, it could be a cave ruin. How do you ruin a cave? Why don't you go ask your mum? But finally, at the end of the day, the main thing is that we enjoy ourselves. So let's just have fun. Yeah, the L has to be here. It is part of the alphabet, but that's alongside the J, V, and F ruins that make for a varied, limitless, fantastic jaunt through the 41st millennium. I totally didn't have a bunch of leftover letters to try and force into some sort of name, and it turns out they're all literally just L-shaped ruins. No way. Don't be ridiculous. This absolutely wasn't an idea for a joke. I had to make ruins of all the letters of the alphabet before realizing they're all just different ways of putting L's together. Of course, I didn't realize in the process of making this video that there are so many letters that could just be adjusted to cover the majority of the entire fucking alphabet, and adding a slight protrusion to a wall doesn't actually make a goddamn bit of difference. Or that circles are basically impossible to do with these ruins. I had to do this jag bullshit to try and fit these useless fucking letters. Like, I mean, Q? Q? What do you even do, Q? There's a reason no one likes you. You're fucking annoying in Scrabble. You can't go anywhere without your emotional support valve. Grow up! It doesn't matter how I try to make the new letters. They're still just goddamn L's. But you, who left such an angry comment, who feels so justified, so righteous in their crusade against the L-shaped ruins, you somehow have the gall to be upset about L-shaped ruins? You don't play the game! You said you'd rather die because of L-shaped ruins, but you pathetic fool, you don't even know. You don't even realize, do you? It's all L's. It's always been L's. From woods to walls. Closed buildings, L's. Craters, L's. Pipes, L's. Even the forest and the trees, just L's. Nature is L's. I look around and all I see is L's. You whine so loudly, so proudly that all ruins are L's. Look around you. Let it reveal the truth. Do not lie to yourself any longer. Around every corner, the L is there. It has always been there. There is nothing that cannot be an L. L is the light. I am no longer lost. L is limitless. L is love. L is life. L-shaped ruins are the objectively correct way to play the game, to play any game. If you cannot find a way to use L's to make something new, something unique, something creative, something beautiful, then you have no soul. You are lacking. And maybe you think I'm wrong, that I'm the crazy one. Maybe you think L-shaped ruins are just lame, and despite all I've said, you still think that Games Workshop and the wider community should be more encouraged to try something new, to try and implement some of the terrain features and the core rules. Maybe you just want there to be more support and more options for you to have easier access to scenic and flavorful boards to play 40k on. And maybe you think that the L isn't coming for you. But you're wrong. The L has found you. Do not try to flee. It's already too late. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can support the channel further by becoming a member or Patreon like all of these lovely lads and lasses. Your support leans to loyalty and lets you access a Lupa Leap at supporters club, where we live every day in leverance la 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 la.